Just plain Democrat, not a conservative Democrat, not a Dixiecrat, nothing but just plain Democrat. Actually, most Democrats in Texas are fairly conservative. They want to have compassion. They want to help people, but they want to be reasonable about it. And I think that most of them agree with me that we ought to, when they get right down to it, that you ought to be interested in helping people, but you ought to be interested in helping everybody.
Jack Brooks grew up in Beaumont, attended Lamar University, University of Texas, and was elected congressman in 1952. And he served the people of Beaumont in southeast Texas for 42 years. And he was a very powerful Democrat. He had strong relations with the labor unions, and he did many economic development projects for Beaumont, Port Arthur, the southeast Texas region. He was very close to Speaker Sam Rayburn and also to Majority Leader of the Senate, Lyndon B. Johnson, who of course later was Vice President and then President of the United States. In working with Lyndon Johnson, Jack Brooks voted for some very important and controversial new laws, especially the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Before this law, 1964, there was widespread discrimination and segregation against black people in the United States, especially in the southern United States. Black people were barred from going in restaurants and cafes and motels and movie theaters. They could work in those places, but they were not welcome there as customers or clients. So there was widespread discrimination, and many people thought that should be changed. And during the year of 1963, President Kennedy proposed a new civil rights law, and he was doing this in part based on rising tensions in the South, especially in Birmingham, Alabama. And President Kennedy and his administration introduced a sweeping civil rights bill, but it was sort of stalled out and it wasn't being passed. There was opposition from the South and other people, and then they made the trip to Dallas. President Kennedy and President Johnson made the trip to Dallas in November of '63 while this bill was pending in Congress, and a number of people went with them, including Congressman Brooks. And Congressman Brooks and Lyndon Johnson were in the motorcade in downtown Dallas on November the 22nd when President Kennedy was assassinated. President Johnson went back to the airplane, Air Force One. He took the oath of office, the presidency, with Jack Brooks and other people looking on. In that year of '64, after the assassination, after Johnson became president, the Civil Rights Bill was brought forward. And with President Johnson's leadership and the leadership of others, including Jack Brooks, they brought that bill to fruition, and it was passed and became law. I believe it was signed July the 2nd, 1964. And that changed everything in the South and the United States with respect to segregation. That broke the back of segregation in the South. It was a huge step for Johnson and Brooks and other Americans. Brooks was one of 11 Southern congressmen who voted for it. All the other Southerners voted against it, including many Texans. So Brooks was a major player in this huge change. He went with Johnson the next year in the Voting Acts right of '65 and in the Housing Act of 1968. So Jack Brooks, who's featured here on this statue on the Lamar campus, was a major player in change in the United States. And he's honored here on the Lamar campus for many things that he did for our region and for this Lamar University campus.